History of English Literature, Restoration Period, 1660 to 700, Part A. Brief questions with answers. Question 1. Why did the Restoration take place? Answer. Restoration took place after the returning of Charles II to the English throne in 1660 with the restoration of monarchy. Question 2. Who was restored to the English throne in 1660? Answer. King Charles II was restored to English throne. Question 3. Who was the last ruler of Tudor dynasty? Answer. Elizabeth I was the last queen of Tudor dynasty. Question 4. Who was Tudor? Answer. Tudor was the father of King Henry VII. Question 5. Who was the first Stuart king? Answer. James I was the first Stuart king. Question 6. Who was Charles I and when was he beheaded? Answer. James VI of Scotland ruled England as James I from 1603 until 1625. James' son Charles I ruled until civil war broke out in 1642. He was beheaded in 1649. Question 7. Who was Oliver Cromwell? Answer. Oliver Cromwell was a Puritan leader who came into the power after the death of Charles I. Question 8. When was monarchy restored in English throne? Answer. Monarchy was restored in English throne in 1660. Question 9. What were the literary features of the Restoration Age? Answer. The features were firstly imitation of the ancient masters, secondly imitation of the French, thirdly to follow the correct school. The authors were rationalistic, satirical, and reflected the spirit of the age in their works. Question 10. Who are the major poets of Restoration Age? Answer. John Dryden, Samuel Butler, and Alexander Pope are the major poets of Restoration period. All of them wrote satire to expose the follies and vices of the age. Question 11. Who were the major dramatists of the age? Answer. John Dryden, William Congreve, Oliver Goldsmith, William Wycherley, George Etheridge are the major dramatists of the Restoration Age. Their works reflected the immorality of the age. Question 12. Mention some name of Restoration tragedy and comedy. Answer. Restoration tragedies are number 1, All for Love, number 2, Don Sebastian. Restoration comedies are The Way of the World, number 2, Comical Revenge or Love in a Tub. Restoration tragedies were heroic tragedy and comedies are called comedy of manners. Question 13. What does the title of Congreve's play The Way of the World suggest? Answer. The Way of the World suggests the way of the Restoration Age, fashion, custom, manner of that time. The title reflects the ethos of the Restoration Society that immorality was the way of the society. Question 14. What does All for Love refer to? Answer. Dryden's All for Love refers to Shakespeare's Antonio and Cleopatra. Antonio lost all for the love of Cleopatra. Question 15. What was the effect of Puritanism on the Restoration Age? Answer. The Puritanism adversely affected the Restoration Age. Excessive puritanical ideas resulted in Restoration Society, its immorality and materialism. Question 16. Why the comedy of Restoration Age is called the comedy of manners? Answer. The comedy of Restoration Age reflects the manner, adulterous relationship between man and woman, love and marriage of the upper class people of the time in order to ridicule. So the comedy is called the comedy of manners. Question 17. Who wrote Annus Mirabilis? Answer. Annus Mirabilis was written by Dryden. It is a satirical poem. Question 18. What is the meaning of the title Annus Mirabilis? Answer. It is a poem by Dryden published in 1667. It gives a spirited account of the Great Fire and the war with the Dutch. Question 19. Who is the author of the Absalom and Achitophel? Answer. John Dryden is the author of Absalom and Achitophel. It is a political satire. Question 20. Who were the historical figures represented the biblical characters in the poem Absalom and Achitophel? Answer. Absalom is the Duke of Monmouth, the unfortunate aspirant to the succession, and Achitophel is his daring but injudicious counselor, Shaftesbury. Question 21. Who wrote Hudibras? Answer. Samuel Butler wrote Hudibras. It is a satire on the Puritanism. Question 22. What type of book is Hudibras? Answer. Hudibras is a satirical poem by Samuel Butler. Question 23. What play of Shakespeare does Dryden imitate in writing All for Love? Answer. Dryden imitates Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra, his All for Love. The subtitle of Dryden's All for Love is The World is Well Lost. Question 24. What type of comedy does Congreve write? Answer. Congreve writes comedy of manners to satirize the follies and vices of the age. Question 25. What type of book is Macflecknoe? Answer. Macflecknoe is a mock heroic poem in which Dryden makes a literary criticism of literary personalities and their work. It is a lampoon on Thomas Shadwell, a dull writer of Dryden's time. Question 26. Name two diary writers of Restoration Age. Answer. John Evelyn and Samuel Pepys are two diary writers of the Restoration Age. Question 29. Who was the representative poet of the Puritan Age? Answer. John Milton was the representative poet of the Puritan Age. He embodies the spirit of Puritanism in total. Question 30. Why is the Restoration Age called the Age of Dryden? Answer. Dryden in his writings reflects all the characteristics of the Restoration period. The social, political, and religious scenario of the age is focused in his works, so the age is named after Dryden. Thank you. Question 31. What influence of French literature do you find in the works of Restoration Age? Answer. Because of influence of French literature, there is a breakup between Elizabethan drama and Restoration drama. Protestantism and free thinking are seen in the Restoration writings. Dramas are realistic that contain contemporary theme. Romance is replaced by the reality. Question 32. Name some religious poems of the Restoration Age. Answer. Religio Medici, the Hind and the Panther are some of the religious poems of the Restoration Age written by Dryden. The first is the thesis in support of English Church, and the second is a defense of Roman Catholic faith. Question 33. Name some verse satirists and prose satirists of the Restoration Age. Answer. Some verse satirists are: number 1, Alexander Pope; number 2, John Dryden. Some prose satirists are Bunyan; number 2, Pepys; number 3, William Temple. Question 34. Name one heroic tragedy and comedy of the Restoration Age. Answer. One heroic tragedy of the Restoration Age is All for Love, and one comedy is The Way of the World. Question 35. Name some prose works of the Restoration Age. Answer. Some prose works of the Restoration Age are: number 1, Essay on Dramatic Poesy; number 2, Pilgrim's Progress. Okay, thank you, viewers.